Theresa May has told the BBC that MPs will have a choice between her proposed deal with the EU or no deal at all.She was also critical of a plan by Brexiteers to resolve the Irish border issue, saying it would create a hard border 20 kilometres inside Ireland. Ex-Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said attempts to resolve the issue so far were a constitutional abomination. And Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg said the Prime Minister should try a bit harder to get a better deal. The UK is set to leave the EU on 29 March 2019, and negotiations between the two sides are still taking place. Ms May set out her proposals for the key issue of cross-border trade after a Chequers summit in July, but it has been fiercely criticised by some Brexiteers who say plans for a common rulebook on goods would compromise the UK's sovereignty. Speaking to Panorama, Mrs May said that, if Parliament does not ratify the Chequers plan, I think that the alternative to that will be having no deal. BBC political editor Laura Kuenssberg said Theresa May calculated that faced with a binary choice of the Chequers deal or no deal, Brexiteers would not have the chutzpah to say no way and Remainers would decide that carrying on fighting the plan would be too risky. But the risks are that the PM cannot say for certain what the final deal will look like, and some Brexiteers were already determined not to vote for it, she added. Mr Johnson's column in Monday's Daily Telegraph renewed his attack on the Chequers proposals and the government's plans for avoiding new border checks on the Northern Irish border. He criticised the UK's decision to agree with the EU on the need for a backstop to avoid a hard border irrespective of a trade deal, saying the issue was being used to coerce the UK into becoming a vassal state of Brussels. Downing Street responded by saying Mr Johnson had been part of the government that signed up to the backstop plan. In her Panorama interview, Mrs May said there needed to be friction-free movement of goods with no customs or regulatory checks between the UK and EU on the island of Ireland in order to avoid a hard border there. Last week, a group of Brexiteer Tory MPs said a hard border could be avoided by using established technology and modifying existing arrangements. Mr Johnson refers to the suggestions by the European Research Group in his column, saying that extra checks done away from the border would prevent the need for physical checks when vehicles move between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. But Mrs May insisted that any system of checks was still a hard border. You don't solve the issue of no hard border by having a hard border 20 kilometres inside Ireland, she said. Former Liberal Democrat leader Sir Nick Clegg told BBC Radio 4's Today programme it was an insult to the intelligence of British voters for the Prime Minister to say it was a choice between either the Chequers fudge or a cataclysmic cliffage. Mrs May has found herself embattled with some in her party after about 50 European Research Group Tory MPs openly discussed how and when they could force her to stand down as Prime Minister. On Sunday, Brexit supporting Environment Secretary Michael Gove said the Chequers plan was the right one for now. He told the BBC a future Prime Minister could alter the relationship between the UK and the EU. Mrs. May will attempt to persuade EU leaders of the merits of her plans at a summit in Salzburg on Thursday. With nearly 6 months to go until exit from the EU on 29 March 2019, a poll commissioned by BBC Radio 5 Live suggests that the UK remains split over whether Brexit will be positive for the UK. According to a Chequers survey, 50% of British adults feel the overall impact will be negative, whereas 41% think it will be positive. When asked about the handling of Brexit negotiations, almost 79% of people polled thought that the government had handled them badly, and 63% thought the EU had handled them badly. The People's Vote campaign, meanwhile, claimed a fresh wave of 18-year-olds becoming eligible to vote was transforming the dynamics of the Brexit debate because they mostly back staying in the EU.